Now, I would like to take a moment to introduce Brian Daniel. Brian works at the HP Graphics Experience Center in Alpharetta, Georgia, and has been instrumental in helping us coordinate this joint event between HP and IT Supplies. So over to you, Brian.
As Bob said, my name is Brian Daniel. I am one of the solutions architects here at HP in Alpharetta, Georgia. Behind me, the star of the show, the Latex 2700W. This is actually a plus model as well. There's a couple of different flavors that you can get this printer in. We'll talk about that as we go through the demo today. But I wanted to welcome you, let you know that my background is from production. So all of the solutions architects here at HP were hired from the field. We work in shops that are similar to the ones that you guys worked in. I personally remember, being at the shop till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, going home, shower, shave, come back, deliver whatever it was I was working on. So when you're putting those Q&A questions down in the chat, feel free to know that it doesn't just have to be about the printer. If you have questions leading up to the printer, design software, RIP software, or post the printer, like what do I need to do to finish these sorts of prints and that sort of thing, we can address those today, or IT Supplies has a plethora of information as well that they can get back to you on those items. So without further ado, let's start talking about the Latex 2700. The target customers that we see for this printer are medium to large print service providers. They print somewhere around the 30,000 square feet a month. They need burst capacity, so it could go over 30, but typically around in that range. Burst capacity on this machine is a need for, cyclical work where you get a hot job in and you need to pound that thing out right away. This machine has the ability to do that with jumbo size rolls and big ink supplies. You want to offer a safe space for your employees and also your customers with recyclable prints that don't produce VOCs. And then, you also want to offer a wide range of applications. So you want to print on pretty much anything you can get on a 3-inch core. So some of those verticals for that are car wraps, decor spaces like wall covering, maybe even some upholstery, point of purchase signs, banners, you name it, you want to be able to print on it. And so this printer with one ink set can do all of those things. And now with the ability to print with white. So that opens up a lot of other applications that you couldn't do before. So a few things about the printer as far as sustainability is concerned. You see all these logos around the printer. Most of them center around, the workflow with the ink system. HP Latex ink has always been environmentally friendly. It's a water-based ink. Water-based meaning water is the vehicle that delivers the pigment and the polymer to the page. So once the pigment and polymer are down, the water evaporates, and that's our only VOC, if you want to call water a VOC. The water escapes through a drying process, and then we cure the latex ink and it's done. There's no more gassing off, so there's no more VOCs to escape into the air. The prints are recyclable as long as you're printing on something that is recyclable. It is Green Guard certified. That's what that little green logo down in the bottom is for. And that means, again, no VOCs coming off the print. And then the other green logo is for Underwriter Laboratories for the eco-friendly eco logo. And what that speaks to is not just the ink itself, but the whole chain. So creating the ink, processing the ink in the plant, shipping the ink, using the ink, and then recycling the ink. You'll be hard pressed to find another ink set that can have all of these certifications. The printer has some things on it that are helping the operator. Proactive maintenance. So right on screen, there's a list of cues and things that I can touch to go through for maintenances, for system information, helping me stay on track with maintaining the machine and keeping it in optimal printing capabilities. So the screen is a touch screen. We call it an internal print server, or IPS for short. I'm going to give you a little demonstration of that. located right here on this touchscreen. I'm going to pull this camera into the shot so you'll get a little bit closer up view of that. So let me set that here. And now let's go to the screen. There we go. So touch screen, meaning I can just touch and drag and drop and do whatever I want to here. I can check on the status of my print heads. I can go into some of the system information. So I can see I have a couple of cartridges getting low on ink, but let's get a print going. So I'm just going to drag and drop these in and you'll see them start popping into the queue. I have 2 rolls here because I have dual roll loaded on the printer. If this was a 126-inch wide roll, you would see 1 long roll here and you can start staging your jobs. I can tell it just by touching it how many copies I want, right? So if I wanted to add, a couple of copies of that, a couple of copies of this, I could. And then I hit print and now we start printing. It's pretty simple. I also have this dashboard where I can see all of this information going on. My ink cartridges, my print heads, everything right here at a glance. I like living in this view where I can see all my jobs and I can be sending other jobs while these jobs are printing. And I can even set up more queues. So I have this tab here. I could add another tab and I can start dragging jobs into those tabs. And they don't even have to be the same media. So I can be staging my production for the next set of rolls right away. You can see all the different medias that I have over here and the files associated with those. So I can just keep dragging in as we go. So that's the IPS. We also have the status beacon up here. The nice thing about the status beacon is it allows me to keep track of what's going on at the printer, even when I'm across the way, right? So I can be over running our cutter. We have some cutters back in the background. And I can do that and still look up and say, hey, yeah, the printer's green and flashing. That means it's making me money. If it's solid green, it means that it's waiting to print. If it goes to yellow, that means there's an alert on screen that something I need to address. Maybe it's getting low on ink or something like that. If it goes red, obviously means we're not printing. We can't print. Maybe I ran out of ink, right? So I didn't address it in time. That's the status beacon. The next thing is Print OS. Okay, so I can keep track of what's going on here. I can look at what's going on from across the room, but what if I'm not in the building? If I'm not in the building, we have this software called Print OS. It's an app that you can download to your phone. You can keep track of this anywhere you have an internet connection. So you don't need to have the same network in the same building. I know some of our competition, they work that way. You could literally be on a flight 30,000 feet in the air with an internet connection and see what's going on in your printer in real time. You can pull all sorts of reports. You can pull the last month, the last 6 months, the last year. You can see all the data there. What was your work like? How much did you print? How much ink did you consume? What was your biggest volume of media that was used? And you can use all of this data to then make better purchasing decisions and decide, like, what's my production going to look like for next month based on the current month's use. You can also keep track of all your service cases. You can see open cases, closed cases, and you can pull reports on all of this, by the way. There's also a desktop version. So you can go on a web browser on your computer, or you can go here to the IPS and use the web browser there. It's just a Windows machine. And you can pull up all these different reports and export out, say, an Excel spreadsheet that shows me all of the different usages. You can also go to our media locator that you see here. There's a lot of media that HP's already profiled for you. So you don't have to, generate brand new profiles. You can go to our media locator. We've already done all the work. You can type in a specific name of something that you're looking for, download the profile straight into your printer, and then sync it with the RIP, and you got all the color data there for you. We also have the HP Latex Knowledge Center. That's where you can go learn more about different applications, different things that you could use to grow your business. And it kind of gives you a summary of what those target markets are, as well as how do I go after it. That's Print OS. The next thing is our color gamut. So new to this ink set with Gen 4 ink, Gen 3 would have been all the 300 and 3000 series and the Latex 1500. Now we're into Gen 4. Gen 4 ink has a 19% wider color gamut than Gen 3. That's because of a couple of things. Number one, we increased the pigment load. So there's more pigment per volume of droplet of ink in Gen 4 versus Gen 3. Also, they tweaked the pigments. So they made them brighter, made them out of a brighter pigment tone. And so that has increased our color gamut, not over just Gen 3 latex ink, but also over our competition. So if you looked at the same 6 colors from a UV printer, we're 30%, plus or minus 30% over our competition with UV inkjet printers. The drying and the curing on the printer, remember I said this is a water-based ink set. We need to evaporate the water out of the ink. We use this convection heat module to do that. So all convection heat is, if you've gotten curious and cracked open a convection heat oven at home, is a coil system, right? You have these metal coils, you heat those up, and you force air across it with a fan. There's one of these in the back section of the printer that's heating that chamber right here internally, and that promotes the evaporation of the water. Typically just a little over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then in the front, we're using the same thing, just bigger. This is convection heat again, but a larger curing module. The curing happens here in the front. There's 12 of these modules across the printer, 2 in each of the divided sections that you see behind me. And the curing section kind of looks like this. You have the media coming across, and then it goes down at a 45-degree angle, and then it exits out here. The curing is focused down on the media, and that cures the latex polymer. If you're new to latex ink, or maybe you've known latex ink, but assumed perhaps that it was like a latex paint, it's actually not. It's latex more like a balloon or like a glove. For those reasons, it has elasticity properties. It's, like we call it, a latex polymer. Okay, so when you're printing to something like self-adhesive vinyl, it can stretch with the self-adhesive vinyl, and when you hit it with heat, it bounces right back and the color doesn't shift, the color doesn't change, it elongates with it. The curing of that polymer, again, happens here, and we're using less heat to do it now. So with Gen 4 ink, we improved the temperature that the ink fires at through the printhead, that it dries at, and also that it cures at. It opens up a whole wider array of media that I could not use before with Gen 1, 2, and 3 latex ink. Thin tissue papers, heat-sensitive polypropylenes, some thin magnets that would hold heat because of the magnet metal in it, right? They would start to warble. I don't have that problem anymore. So really robust ink system, and lower temperature brings more applications into play. The portfolio of accessories that we have on this printer are pretty broad. We're going to touch on each one of these. I want to give your eye a rest right here, just so you can see some of them. I won't point them all out on this slide because we're going to touch virtually on every one of these as we go. But let's start off with just the ink collector. So I have that right here. It comes in this black box, and it looks like this. Okay. What an ink collector is used for is if you're printing onto a mesh media. I happen to have one right here. This is a black mesh that's meant for a roller blind. You might be printing onto a white mesh for, say, a sports arena or a fence screen for a construction site, something like that. Well, the media can come with a liner on it, but it makes it more expensive. Plus, once you print it, now you got to pull that liner off. If you've never done that, it's laborious. It takes a lot of time. So it'd be much easier and quicker and less expensive if we print it directly onto the mesh without a liner. And then once we're done, it's done. I can go finish it, cut it, whatever I need to do, and I don't have to strip that liner off. But if the ink can go through the media, the ink's going to get all over the printer. So we add this ink collector to collect ink. So the media goes across this surface here, and then we have these felts that are on the inside that absorb all of that ink. You can see here, this black roller blind, we're actually printing with white ink on top of it. So you can do white ink printing with the ink collector as well. There's enough of these pieces in the ink collector to go across the whole platen, 6 of these. It takes probably 2 minutes for me to put that on the printer. So really easy to put it on, really easy to take it off. And because we have variable head height on the printer knows how far to come up and then back down to the height of the ink collector, so it's not going to bump into it. But that also allows me to run thicker media. So if I have a media, we'll say I'm not using the ink collector, but it's a little bit thicker. I've printed on 50 mil clear vinyl flooring, which is what you see here underneath my feet. Second surface with white ink on the bottom, right? And then I've also printed onto carpet. Not carpet for your house because it is ink on top of the surface, but I know a lot of people would like to print carpet for temporary use, like a trade show, like a special event where you need a red carpet with maybe some logos up the side. Perfect for that. And because of the variable head height, I can do that. Okay. The next thing is inline slitters. So I have this slitter here that can be attached to the printer on the front. I want to show you up close what it looks like before I go show you where it goes on. It's just a razor blade, as you can see here. So you're going to use the corner of the razor blade to cut in line vertically. This the slitter you can rotate the blade around to each of the corners. So you're going to use the same blade 4 times. And then it attaches to this channel right here on the printer. You slide it wherever you want it. I'll put it here. You tighten it down so that it doesn't move anymore. And then you insert the blade and lock the blade in place. And now as the printer is moving the media forward, it's vertically slitting this in line. It's great for, wall covering or something like that, where you have panel work and you want to cut the edges off. Banners, same thing. Some people want the banners finished right when they come off. So I tell, my customers, I'll make all the vertical long cuts for you and you make all the shortcuts across the printer. The printer does not have a slitter that goes left to right. I get asked that question, so I'll go ahead and answer that one for you before you put it in the chat. We need tension to pull it through the printer. It's a 10.5 foot wide printer. So we need active tension pulling the media through. So we can't lose tension by cutting it, but we can vertically slit in line. The kit comes with 4. So you have enough when you're running dual roll to slit the edges off of each side. You can add more kits on. So I have some customers, they want to slit the edges off the side and they want to bust up the middle into more rolls. You can do that as well. And I have some customers that'll load a 10.5 foot wide roll and then they'll bust it into 5 separate banners that are 2 foot wide. So they would need more slitters for that. So you can use these slitters a multitude of different ways and they work really well. The next thing is the jumbo rolls. Okay, so there's a couple of different versions, as I mentioned early on, of the printer, where you can order a basic model that just comes with a solid spindle. That spindle can hold up to 660 pounds, 126 inches wide. So all of the 2700s can load a single spindle that large. The dual roll spindle is where we change. The dual roll spindle, regular dual roll spindle like I have here, can hold 155 pounds per side. But there is a version that can handle larger rolls. To give you a sense of what those rolls can look like, I'm going to roll this out here for you. So excuse me while I go off camera and grab this big boy. There we go. Into camera we come. So this is a 126-inch wide roll of canvas that is 15 3/4 inch in diameter. Okay, kind of hard to see that on camera because it's so big. But you can also get the smaller rolls that are 61 inches wide and can weigh 440 pounds per side. So versus the 155-pound standard size rolls, this can run up to up to 440 pounds. I set my AI off on my camera, so now it's going to follow me around. So massive rolls that you can load into this. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, if I want to run longer rolls unattended overnight, this printer is made to do that. It's made to run, a full shift without having to have intervention with webbing it back up again. And I can do that in dual roll. So there is an option to add a jumbo dual roll system that actually has split spindles. So instead of having a joined single roll spindle, you would actually have two spindles split in half. We're going to go around to the back and I'll kind of show you what that looks like. All right, so here we are at the back of the printer. Again, you can see dual roll, regular joined spindle here in the back. The split spindles are over here to the side. So I'm going to bring one of them over so you can see what that looks like. So this is one of the spindles. It goes in like this. You can see half of the distance. And then instead of that center support there, remember this is only holding 155 pounds per side. This becomes the center support. Much beefier. And it needs to be because it's going to hold a 440-pound roll on each side. So 880 pounds together going into the printer. For those larger rolls, you would definitely want a lifter, like you saw me rolling the big roll around up front. Drop it right in, really easy to load. I know this looks somewhat intimidating at first, but trust me, I load this printer all day long by myself. It's not a big deal. I'm 53 years old this year, so the least lifting and all of that I need to do, the better. And super easy to load if you have the right tools to load it with. But you drop the rolls in, push this button right here, the light goes off. That tells the front panel that I am ready to load media into the printer, and it's raising the carriage up to give me access to this door. I drop this handle here and here. This door comes open, and here's where I would put the media into the printer. For me, what I do is I pull the rolls across this table. That's why we call it a loading table, not really a door, a table. Pull the media across the table on both sides, grab both rolls, close this up. Some of the media will be hanging out here. Latch this up, go around to the front. I hit a button and it brings the media over to me. I have customers that come in all the time and they run our low volume printers, or maybe some other brand's low volume printer. And the media path just to feed it up through those smaller printers is such a pain. You're feeding it up like this and around and trying to get it to come through. And I have customers that come in and they see this and they're intimidated by the size. But then once I show them how easy it is to load, they're like, dang, that was easier than my current printer that's smaller. And it is. So latch up, go back around to the front, hit a button, brings it over to me. Pretty simple. I'll join you back around front. So, see if I can catch my camera here. Follow me, little guy. Can you follow me? No? Okay. I'll get you to do it this way then. All right. Now it found me. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the media saver. So the media saver is a little ingenious invention that our engineers came up to address the issue of loading the printer. Whenever you load a true roll-to-roll printer, you're going to have a web up. So you're going to have some media that's going to need to go down to the spindle before you start printing. Obviously, the printing is going to start back here, right? So you have this web up. Well, this helps with that web up. So what it is a material that looks like a seat belt, and it has these magnets on the inside of the flaps. A really thin magnet right here. It's really strong. And then there's magnets on the back that will attach to the printer. So you drop this guy up here like this, you feed your media across, and then open the flaps, put the media in up to the red line. So just that much. Close the flaps, and now this becomes your leader to go into the printer. The printer opens like this. You just pull this handle up and this handle up. Open that up, and the media drops down inside. Pretty easy. to do, right? And again, I just hit a button on the IPS and it brings the media over for me. That's the media saver. You can buy them as singles or you can get a couple if you want. I would probably get two so that I can run dual roll. But also if I'm running a 126-inch wide roll, then I could use two of them together to load that roll. Really, really simple to do. Okay. Next thing, roll to free fall. So on roll to free fall, I'm going to stop my AI camera here. Stop right there. There we go. No, it didn't stop. Here, do it one more time. Okay, I'll just talk about it until it stops moving on me. So roll to free fall is being able to print to the floor. It adds an extra set of pinch wheels to the printer, as you can see in the video. And then the media gets taped up to that. Now you can go roll to the floor, or in the video, you see him going roll and back to the take up. And the reason he's doing that is so that he can cut it while it's printing. As you see there, the printer is printing. He cuts loose some of the roll, goes ahead and takes that over to finishing. The printer keeps printing because it has tension through that roll to free fall kit. Then he can tape it back up, turn the take up back on, and then he's taking back up to the front spindle. But this is the more common use when you print it to the floor and you want to take off some of it while it's coming out. So maybe you have a job and it's a hot job and you need to get that work off immediately, then you can cut it off like he's doing right now. That's the roll to free fall. There is an I1 spectrophotometer on all of our latex printers, but some people don't realize that, especially if you're coming from a different brand of printer. So built into the printer is this little guy. It's the same type of I1 that you would have offline to measure color with. We're using it on the printer to do a linearization. So on all printers, you need to keep your color consistent. On our printer, we do that work for you. And we store it at the printer, which if you think about it, is the smartest place to store it. The RIP, where you would normally go to do a linearization target for any other printer other than HP Latex, you would have to do all that work offline. So you would print a target out, cut it off, take it back to the RIP, use an I1 to sight it in, sometimes by hand, or if you paid for the robotic table, maybe you have a little more money and spent for the robotic. And then you have to print out a global ink limit target. Take that back to the RIP, sight that in. That whole process can take you about an hour. And now you need to do it on every media that you're doing. That's a lot of work. On our printer, we just click a button and it checks, prints, and then automatically calibrates the color for us. Then it stores that at the printer. Again, that's the smarter place to do it because the RIP has no idea how much ink you put through the print heads. The RIP has no idea if you changed a print head, but the printer knows, okay? And this is not just for use on just our printer technology. All printers need to be relinearized from time to time. And we take that process out of a workday for our operators. So really handy to have a built-in spectrophotometer right on the printer. Optical Media Advanced Sensor. We refer to this guy as OMAS for short. What it is a little camera that sits on the platen underneath the media. So while the media is going across this camera, it's taking rapid fire pictures of the bottom of the media. There's a wide aperture lens on the OMAS, and it is comparing the fibers of the media from one picture to the next while the media is moving. It aligns all those pictures together and uses the media like it's a tape measure. That way it knows how far the media traveled on each pass. That way it can align the print heads to that as well. So in the printer, we also have fiber optic data lines, and we can send 10 gigs of data up to the print heads in a second, 10 gigs a second. So we reserve some nozzles on either side of the print head, And then OMOS can tell those nozzles, if it saw the media pull too far ahead, it can shift the nozzle pattern forward or backward based on what it saw. If it didn't fire far enough, then it would shift it back the other way. So it does all of this work for you while it's printing. You don't have to do anything. Maybe go run that cutter over there, do something else. It also allows us to run overnight unattended without worry that we're going to get a ton of banding or something like that. I want to be able to run without having to build in my own advanced compensation. So I don't want to have to live here seeing, a dark band where they overlapped and then having to tell the printer to speed up because I want it to be like this instead of overlapping, or the opposite, right? But then that means you are OMOS. So now you live here for the length of that roll. We want to be able to hit print and walk out the door. Okay. Thermal inkjet print heads are a little different than our competition who use piezo print heads for solvent, eco-solvent, and UV printers. Our thermal inkjet print head looks like this. So if you're used to our low volume print heads, they look like this, right? So there's one die here, and on the bottom of this print head, you'll notice there's 5. A lot of people, when they know this print head, they think this came out first, and then we put 5 in a row here. Not true. This came out first, actually. They manufacture these nozzles in silica, so they manufacture them the same way that they would a computer wafer board. And if there is a flaw in one of the wafers, then it's a whole lot less expensive to throw away that part of the wafer than it is to throw away a whole die of wafer. The nozzles are 1/3 the size of your hair. I want you to think about that for a second. So if I took my hair and I put it across the nozzle, and then I looked under a very high-powered microscope, my hair would cover up 3 nozzles. So when customers ask me how robust these print heads are, I tell them something 1/3 the size of your hair would have to get up in there to clog the nozzle. There's resistors inside of this print head. Those resistors heat up the water that's in the ink. The ink then thermally swells, and then that's what displaces the droplet out. So it's unlike piezo, where you're using electricity and electronic doors to shoot the droplets out. We are finally placing those through a nozzle 1/3 the size of your hair, and we can do that 9,000 times a second. It's unbelievable. I got to talk to one of the engineers in San Diego where they developed this print head, and also where they have a manufacturing line. I got to see their robotic hand placing all of these nozzles in there. And I was blown away when she told me that 9,000 times a second is what this nozzle fires. There are 10,560 nozzles in each one of these print heads. That's a lot of nozzles firing 9,000 times a second. But we need it because the printer is a true 1200 DPI printer, meaning it doesn't have to res down to print faster. Piezo does, and you know this. You print 1200 DPI, you want to run faster, it drops to 6, or it drops to 3, depending on your speed, 300 DPI versus 12. We are 1200 DPI all the time. I can hold 4-point text on a billboard if I wanted to. I don't know what billboard needs 4-point text, but I could do it if I needed to. The next thing is our print speeds through this print head. So you see some of the pass modes over there, and then on the right-hand side, you kind of see on average where we think you should land with pass modes compared to a media type. Now, we'll tell you some of these, depending on the particular canvas or self-adhesive vinyl, you might actually be able to run faster. So there's been some SAVs that I could run at 4 or maybe even 3 pass. PVC banner, I routinely run at 3 pass, unless it's a billboard, I might run it at 2 pass. Keep in mind that the increase in pigment, the increase in the higher density of pigment, allows me to run usually a speed faster than our next fastest printer with using less volume of ink. I get to the same color because the density of the pigment is 19% greater. So if I were using one of my older Gen 3 printers that needed, let's say, 120% ink, and I needed to run that at 4-pass, I could run at 3-pass 90 and get the same color, but running a speed faster and with less volume of ink. The next thing is the white. Okay, everybody's been waiting for this, a 3.2 meter latex printer with white. The white is the glossiest white in the industry. When we polled customers, that was something that was important to them, to have a white that had a glossy appearance. It's the whitest white in the industry. A lot of people got used to our R series printers having this white, really bright ink. We can attain that whitest white in the industry because we don't have photo initiators in our ink. So UV ink needs those photo initiators in order to harden. That's where it gets its adhesion from. And the more photo initiators in it, the more yellow it appears, okay? So the yellowing is now knocked back in some of the UV inks by adding what we call optical brighteners. We know this because we used to sell UV printers as well. The optical brighteners, however, are dye, and dyes fade over time, usually within 3 to 6 months, depending on how much sunlight or UV lamps exposure they may have. So we would have customers saying, hey, I print, museum quality work, but it's under these intense lights and it's starting to make those prints turn yellow. You don't have that with latex ink. Why? Because we don't cure that way. We're a latex polymer. We don't need the photo initiators. The other thing that UV inks suffer from, again, we know because we used to make the same type of printers, is chipping. So when you go to finish a piece and you cut it, a lot of times around the edges, it will be brittle and chip. Again, that's the way UV ink cures. It's a crystal, it crystallizes. We can cut our ink. It's again, a polymer, cuts like a balloon or a rubber glove. So once it's adhered to the piece, it's not going to separate and pull away or anything like that, or flake off, chip off. It stays right where it's put. And then installation was another key for our customers that we were developing this white ink for. They want to be able to print onto self-adhesive vinyls and films that might get stretched, or thermoform. Thermoforming is a big thing for us right now. Printing to films that will then be heated and elongated. You could never do that with UV white ink. It's just too brittle. Here's some of the print speeds that we have for white ink. There's different layering methods. If you're new to white ink, you have a spot method, meaning spot whites going down. You could still have color around it, but it means that the white is a spot. There is no color on top of it or underneath it. So we have speeds that will allow you to achieve 60% ink density, 100, 160, 260. I may show you some samples here at the end of what various layerings and percentages look like. We have overflood, underflood, 3-layer. 3-layer would be color white color. So if you want one density on the outside, then some white, and then maybe a backlight comes on at nighttime and you want to shine through 2 layers of color, that would be 3-layer, and then 5-layer. 5-layer would be like a McDonald's window where I'm printing French fries on the outside and a hamburger on the inside, and I don't want to be able to see the bleed through for those. So it prints color, white, black, white, color. We can do all of those on this one printer. The print head carriage looks like this. We have one white print head in this carriage. So the white print head can float. In this configuration you see on screen, it's in the underflood position. So the media is moving from top to bottom of the screen, if you can imagine that. The white would go down first and then the color over the top of that. But that print head can move, it can float. So it can move down, and now we're in the spot and the other layering modes, 3-layer, 5-layer, and also overflood, meaning we can put the color down and then white over the top of it, okay? The 2700, as you've seen in this demo, it offers a wide range of different things that you can do with it. Now with the introduction of white, it just makes it that much more robust. We had really good success with our 3000 series and our 1500 printer. in this space, in the 3.2 meter space. And we believe that this is a game changer to be able to offer white and a 3.2 meter printer, increase production with running dual rolls, and also be able to run jumbo rolls, whether that's dual roll or single roll. All right, so now we're ready for Q&A.
Okay, fantastic. I am going to go ahead and share another screen here. All right, so I just wanted to thank you first off, Brian. That was great information. As Brian said, go ahead and start typing into the Q&A box. We already have a few questions that we'll get to in just a minute. In the meantime, I just wanted to talk a little bit about IT supplies. First off, obviously, IT supplies, we sell printers. So we have a full line of latex, eco-solvent, dye sublimation, DTG, high volume label systems, and photo printers. We also have color solutions. And I would say pretty much unlike most of our competitors, we actually are working with customers that have extreme needs to match spot colors. They need special software, they need special equipment. We have all of that in our toolbox, whether it's Onyx, Wasatch, Digital Factory Direct, which is formerly EFI, CADLink, Print Factory, EFI, the RIP itself, SAI Flexi, ErgoSoft, GMG. For equipment, we represent X-Rite, Barbieri, Teshcon, and more. We're very familiar and actually are very familiar with the I1 profiler solutions, and we also work with lighting companies like Houston GTI. So if color is something that you're interested in, it's one of our big expertise. Industry expertise, IT supplies just love sharing our expertise with you to ensure that you have the perfect setup to achieve the best results. As I mentioned, we have extensive knowledge, and not just in the area of color, but our technicians are what I like to call the best and the brightest. We can do personalized training, the color, and beyond. So that is first off. And then when it comes to HP printers, IT supplies can service all of your latex needs. Printing technology inside, we have aqueous, latex, dye sublimation, and flatbeds, as I mentioned, but we do go from 17 to 24, 44, 64, 126. We have those printers. Printer accessories, we have all the ink, the media that you need, the cutters, laminators, finishing equipment. And then finally, just once again, I can't overemphasize it, with the extensive knowledge that we have working with HP printers, IT supplies can help you with everything from color consulting to workflow analysis to customized software and color tools. So that's really key. So just wanted to mention those few things. And now, of course, we can go back to the Q&A. Brian, you still with me?
I am. Yep.
Perfect. So one of the first questions that we got today is this printer capable of doing dual-sided?
Yes, it is. It has a double-sided workflow where you print side A, and then when you tell the printer you're printing double-sided, it prints a black line after each print. Then you take the roll off, flip it over for side B. When you feed that media back into the printer, OMOS, if you remember, the optical media advanced sensor, will find that black line and then know how far from that black line to the print and start printing. Then it'll find the next black line. So it's a really simple workflow. The printer already knows where left and right of the media is, so it just centers it in the media that way. But then through the printer, that's obviously the tougher thing. And where other printers that don't have OMOS, because we have like 50 patents on just OMOS, Where they don't have that, it's more of a manual registration where you're just trying to guess, like, where is the printer going to start printing on that banner or copy that's on the back side of the media. So yes.
Perfect. Are the inks you mentioned, they were Gen 4, and is that the same as the R2000?
It is. In fact, the same exact print head can be used from the R series. The ink is in a different ink box, but the print head themselves are universal between the R series and the Latex 2700. So if you already have an R series printer, the color gamut, the look of the ink, and also the print heads that get used in the printer are all the same.
One of the nice things that I've found about the HP products is that when you replace the print head, you're basically back to the new quality you had when you first started. One of the questions that came up is how many print head SKUs do you need to stock? So if something happens and the quality is degrading, how many SKUs do you need to have on the shelf for the colors and the white?
That's a good question. So in Gen 3, you had to stock a print head for every color. And that is because the ink came inside of the print head. So what we changed with Gen 4 print heads is that instead of putting ink in the print head, and the reason we were doing that is to have fluid in the print head so we don't introduce air bubbles into the print head. We decided to change that and just put a clear shipping fluid in the print head. You only need 3 print heads for this printer: an optimizer print head, a white print head, and a universal print head for everything else. So in the Gen 4 printers, you have CMYK, light cyan, light magenta, and something we call overcoat, which is like a clear protectant that goes over the ink. All of those use the universal print head. When you stick it in the printer, it becomes whatever color or coating that you want it to be once you insert it. The white print head needs a different print head because it has micro recirculation pumps inside of the print head, and it is interacting with the printer with the white ink system. We didn't really talk about this, but we have 0 waste on our white ink. That's different than piezo, where it's constantly purging white ink to keep the nozzles fresh and firing. We don't have that experience. This is a latex ink, so we don't have that same type of ink that's causing the nozzles to clog up. But we do have the issue of titanium dioxide. So in all white inks, that's what the pigment is made out of. And titanium, as you know, is a metal, and metals are heavy, and the ink will settle. So the pigment will actually rest in the ink lines or in the print head the longer it's not used. On our ink system, we pump ink around the printer like a heart. It goes into one side of the bag. I don't know if you can see my video over here, the camera off to the side, but we have 2 bladders inside of our ink box. One comes full of ink and the other one is empty. And then the printer pumps that ink back and forth through those bladders and all the way through the printer, but it also needs to pump it through the white print head. The white print head also has a different nozzle architecture than the rest of the print heads to be able to fire that white ink. So you need a print head for white. And then optimizer. If you're familiar with latex, you know that optimizer is a positive fluid that goes down, and then the ink comes in contact with it, and that pins the pigment in place until we get into the curing section. Once we're in the curing section, optimizer has evaporated and done its job. It held the ink there. And then once the curing section takes over, the ink is secured to the media. So optimizer, because it's positive and the ink is negative, we need that as a print head as well. So 3.
Perfect. We would like to utilize this. This is a question. We would like to utilize this printer for fabric printing for outdoor signage similar to street banners and feather flags that will not fade as quickly as water-based dye sublimation prints do outdoors. Does the 2700 have the ability to run fabrics that are polyester based and not coated for UV/latex inks?
Yes, but this is a loaded question. Okay. The pigments won't fade. Okay, we we won't have the same issue as the timeline of die printed flags. But the ink is on the surface versus dyed into the fabric. So if ink is on the surface, just like UV, just like solvent, just like latex, it's not embedded into the polyester, then with weather and with whipping in the wind, you can start to abrase that ink off. That's why HP also sells a dye sub printer for that application. Also for anything that you would want to launder. Okay, so if you want to print a trade show booth, if it's a one up and done and it comes back down and goes in the trash, then no problem. But if it's going to be put up and then somebody steps on it while they're putting it back into the trade show case and then they need to launder it, that's a problem. It's ink on top of fabric instead of ink in the fabric. And so you can rub it and, you know, abrase it, scratch it, and over time you'll take ink off. There's an application, you know, for both. There's an argument for which one you want to use. Now, I have some customers that will print to a treated fabric that is coated for latex. You kind of alluded to that in your question. It gives it better scratch resistance. Because of that, if you use one of those products, it will probably in certain conditions not fade as fast, because our fading doesn't come from true pigment fading or dye fading. It comes from pigment being released. The coated fabrics tend to grip onto the ink a little better and hold it on the surface so that you don't get fading as quickly. Basically, it's the release of that pigment coming off of the media surface. I hope that answered the question. If not, put another one in the Q&A.
Well, kind of related, how does the color of the 2700 compare to dye sub? Are you seeing a lot of customers adopt this latex technology for textile applications that require more UV light access? So
yeah, again, it's kind of the same discussion as what we just talked about. If it's interior, obviously with very little abrasion, then you're not going to have an issue. But if you're laundering it, you will. However, I will make this little caveat statement. We can print onto certain textiles that dye sub cannot. Again, that's why HP makes one of each. If you're printing to just polyester and it needs to have a high level of durability, I recommend printing to dye sub, right? If you're going to print for something that needs to have UV resistance, then pigment printers are the way to go. There's another caveat though, and that is naturals. So if you want to print to a burlap bag, if you want to print to a canvas, a cotton, a linen, something like that, you can't sublimate that. You can't dye it. The only thing that you can use dye on is polyester. It's the only thing that will open up and receive the dye gas ink. The latex pigment can stick to those natural fibers, actually a little better than polyester. But there are certain textiles out there that have been formulated to work with our latex ink that can be made into things like upholstery or draperies. They have used a chemistry through a dunk bath. So they weave it at the mill and then it goes through a bath, gets coated with a chemistry that then reaches up from underneath and grabs onto our ink. You then take that printed piece and run it through a calendar, so a heat press, just like you would a sublimated piece, and that extra heat opens up the chemistry and locks the ink into it. Then you can dry clean it. You can make a pillow out of it and throw it in your washing machine at home and dry it, and the ink won't come off. The problem is, to be fair, those textiles are very niche and they come at a cost. So you probably wouldn't want to use the same kind of textile for a flag. It would be cost prohibitive.
yeah, and just to your point here, we do, like in our showroom, Premix, we actually have a upholstered chair that is completely made from a combination of dye sublimation, but also latex inks. So it is It's really fascinating, and that chair's been around for years now and still going strong. So
Yeah, it's pretty bulletproof stuff.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. Um, Can you talk a bit about what you see as the biggest advantages of the 2700 over the 1500? I know it's a long list, but they were asking if you could give like the top 5.
Sure. White.
Yeah.
Jumbo rolls. Speed. Speed is huge compared to the 1500. Remember that white print head that can move forward and backward depending on what you're printing? That white
Yep.
print head, because it's not a piezo head, it's our thermal inkjet print head, that white print head can come completely out, and we can insert a second print head, a second set of color. So we can put in a cyan black print head, and we effectively double all of our color. I don't know if you remember on the slide that we were looking at, but it was black, cyan, yellow, magenta, light colors, light cyan, light magenta, and then a second yellow magenta print head. And then now I have the opportunity to stick in a cyan black print head where the white was. That doubles my array of print heads, and that increases my ability to put down ink at speed. So for the 1500, we're double to almost 3 times the speed of a 1500 using the 2700. The other nice thing, and this might be number 4 on the list, is the universal print heads. If you remember, we talked about that. Now you're stocking a couple. Oh, look, I'm zooming in now. You don't want to be that close. The universal print head means I'm only stocking those 3. If you get the single, the regular color printer, the 2700 without the white, which is an option, then you're only stocking the 2 print heads, optimizer, and the universal print head. So that's different than the 1500. But because of that universal print head, we're able to make our colors symmetrical. So what do I mean by that? You'll notice I said there's a black cyan, a magenta yellow, a light cyan, light magenta, then a yellow magenta, and a cyan black. So the opposite direction. So when the carriage is moving left to right, coming and going, we're laying the color down symmetrically. What we noticed is with certain colors, and this is true of any digital printer, if your colors are laying down, let's say black, cyan, magenta, yellow, and then lights, but then coming back the other way, it's the opposite lay down, you could start to see A, banding, or B, color shift in those passes. So with being able to lay down the color symmetrically, we have better color consistency than even our own 1500. That again comes from the universal print head.
I know
And
we're
then,
hitting. Oh, go ahead.
No, 5th thing. The 5th thing is lower temperature. So being able to print on more substrates with a lower temperature.
Perfect. I know we're hitting time. I just, there are a few more questions. One of the ones that I think is pertinent before anyone else has to take off is the maintenance on this printer. I know one of the nice things that we've discovered as compared to some of the competition is the automation and the technology built into these printers so that they actually are fairly capable of maintaining themselves with just a little bit of input from the people around it once in a while. So can you just briefly touch on that?
Yeah. So the printer virtually maintains itself with the exception of some weekly maintenances that you may need to do, making sure no ink's on the platen, cleaning the platen. Every so often, you're going to change out the wiping station. So on all latex printers, there's a wiper that keeps the print heads clean when it comes off the capping station. So it just wipes the bottom of the print head for you. Eventually, that cloth, you'll need to replace it. Aerosol filters. These are things that are on all printers, though. The nice thing about it is, given the fact that we have the touchscreen IPS, it steps me through all of those processes, and it has sensors all over the printer. So it knows like what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and then opens up a page to show you how to do it. In fact, on some of the steps, if it's a little more involved, they've created videos where you can click a link and it'll show you exactly how to do what it's talking about. That saves you from having to go pull out some 300-page user manual and do those sorts of things. The printer, though, if you've ever owned one of our latex printers before, the maintenances are very, very similar. I would say the only thing that would be an addition on this printer would be using distilled water. We have, with Gen 4 ink, we have a distilled water tank that we fill that it squirts some water onto the bottom of the wiping station just to clean the print heads better. So that's really the only other thing I can think of.
Yeah, no, I mean, just speaking from experience, and I've run this printer, well, I've run printers like this a lot with the HP technology. Just the fact that when you need to get someone else up to speed, and like you said, with that touch screen that is so easy to use, and then when you get into like the maintenance and the videos and the support things, if somebody needs to go on vacation and somebody that doesn't do it every day has to take over, it's the kind of thing that's really easy to do, and you can keep that printer up and running, and people do get to take vacation. So that's kind of nice. So the last question I have at this juncture is, can you confirm that the dual roll option for the 1500 or S1000 can also be used on the 2700 at no cost? Maybe this requires a shim or something, but can you confirm that?
That's a very good question. So yes, and yes. So the spindle is identical. The little center support is identical with the exception of, and you nailed it, the spindle sits higher. The spindle sits higher because it needs to handle those 15 3/4 inch in diameter rolls. So it needs to be up off the floor to be able to handle that bigger diameter. So because of that, you would need an extra shim underneath. The good news is we already thought of that, and so we sell a kit of shims. It would be a cost, but yeah, it's cheaper than buying a whole new dual roll setup. So
sounds good. All right, I think that's going to conclude things. So thank you, Brian, for your help in coordinating this event. I hope that everyone will walk away from this webinar more knowledgeable about the HP 2700W and the benefits that it can provide each user. Please don't forget to contact your IT supplies representative with any questions you have about this printer. Certainly they want to help you. Again, we also have color services. So if you would like to talk about color services, automation, other color controls that you can do with this printer or others, just let us know. Your IT supplies representative has the tools behind them to help you accomplish everything you need. So thanks to all our attendees. You've been tremendous. We hope that you will join us again on future webinars. Take care and have a wonderful day.